Hey folks, Matt from artoftheimage.com. I was watching another one of Tony Northrup's videos. I find some of them quite interesting. Not necessarily because I agree with them, but just I'm wondering where he gets some of his stuff from. He was talking about ISO and crop factor and the correlations he's found, and saying that you had to apply multipliers to ISO. And I think he's totally wrong on this one, because ISO is a function of exposure. And aperture, shutter speed, and ISO remain constant regardless of crop factor. So you don't need to multiply your ISO by a crop factor. It's going to whack out your exposure. Your exposure is going to be messed up if you do that. For instance, you could take a Sony a6000, you could take a Nikon D750, you could take a Canon T6i, you could take any number of cameras. And if your exposure is correct, let's say outdoors, let's say it's a bright sunny day, f8, 250, 1/250th of a second, maybe even f10. Let's say f8 for sake of argument. 1/250th of a second at ISO 200. Let's say the base ISO across all is 200. If that is the correct exposure, it's going to be correct on the D750. It's going to be correct on the T5i. It's going to be correct on the 7D Mark II. It's going to be correct on the A6000. It's going to be correct on any of the Micro Four Thirds cameras, the GH4, the EM1, the EM10. It's going to be correct on any camera. That is your exposure. You do not apply a crop factor multiplier to the ISO rating to get your correct exposure. And I don't know where he's coming up with this, but you're gonna mess up your exposure if you do that. What do you guys think? Have you tried this? I mean, you could take your camera and you can see. You might have to go with a friend if you don't have two cameras. But your exposure is your exposure. If your exposure is f8 at 1/250th of a second at ISO 200, it's not going to change on a Micro Four Thirds camera. You could check it out and see. Go into a camera store and check it out. I mean, I could show you that on two different cameras. Maybe we'll do a subsequent video where I'll go out and show you the exposure, the settings, the correct exposure on, what do I have? I've got D5200. I've got an LX100. I have a GH4 coming back. I should have a Sony coming in soon. I can show you on various cameras, and we'll have a look. Even on a pocket camera, like I gotta double check. Can I dial in manual on my SX50? Might be able to do that too. In any case, you can test it for yourself. It's pretty easy to understand. Your exposure, your correct exposure, is the same right across the board, regardless of whether you're shooting full frame, whether you're shooting aps-c, whether you're shooting Micro Four Thirds. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. Do you agree with me, or do you agree with Tony? It's kind of hard to refute this one, because it's just kind of a law of, it's a fact. Your exposure, your correct exposure, is your exposure. Doesn't change across the different crop factors. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com.